And we are up on YouTube.
Is Rick on with us, Rick Giroux?
No, sir, he's not.
So I don't know if the mayor, is he coming to join us? We heard anything?
Liz just sent me a text that he's about to sign on.
We have a guest. Councilmember Del Chapo, welcome aboard.
Thank you, sir.
And Councilmember Seekings is joining now.
He has a different background. You muted. I'm sorry, I know you were trying to call me.
I was trying to call you, and you were purposely screening your calls and not taking my call. I see where I now stand in the hierarchy in the shade law offices and the chairman of the Public Safety Committee.
Well, if it's between you
heard about that.
I think you're going to lose, so I'm sorry.
You think I'm going to what?
If it's between you and a paying client, the client's going to win out. So.
You know, I have referred some cases to you. I might have had a really big case.
I know you have.
All right. Anyway, it was nothing urgent. If we can get together after the meeting, that would be great.
Run me down. The mayor's with us, so we have a quorum, and I will call to order the Public Safety Committee for December 14th, 2020 at 2 o'clock. And I was just trying to remember if I called on anybody recently to do the invocation. So Councilmember Saccharin, I was going to tag you today, if you don't mind, do the invocation.
Absolutely, Chair. We'll do a moment of silence today. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, sir, for that. The first order of business is approval of rather lengthy minutes of our November 9, 2020. I take a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second. Second. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Aye.
Do we need to go into executive session as to the next item on here, which is our update on 567?
Councilmember Shade, good afternoon, council members.
Hello, there's a wonderful lawyer. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Jared is on the line. I think it really is the nature of the update, and maybe if we could start with the update, and then if it's necessary to go into executive session, we can do that.
And if we could do that at the end, that would be all right. Let's get to the other business. So who will give me an update on Fire Station 11? Chief Coria, you can take the lead on this, or Jason Tonsberg, or Edmund, or?
Good afternoon, everyone. So Beth Brownlee's on the line, and I think Beth is probably in the best position to give us an update, as she is the daily project manager on this project, and she really is doing a great job. So I'll turn the floor over to Beth. Thanks, Beth.
I don't see her on my screen. Beth, where are you?
I am still behind. Yeah,
okay.
I'm waving, but no one can see me. So we have been on site almost daily. The project still has not reached substantial completion, but the contractor and their subs are working daily to address their pre-punch list. We have, again, several pages that I think I updated you guys last on for that pre-punch. I would say that they're probably maybe 25% of the way through. And that is just my estimate from my last site meeting on Thursday afternoon. There are several big issues that they have addressed on the exterior. They have completed their insulated metal panels, and we are waiting on the design team to go out there tomorrow morning to take a look to see if we can get DRB out to give approval for the building. We do have a few other issues on the exterior though that we are waiting on. Finishing painting of the tower. They still need to regrade for positive drainage that we commented on last time. We have not seen the landscaper, and I have asked for an update from Will as of this afternoon and still have not received it. So we do have some big issues that are still outstanding, but they are working towards making some positive progress. In the interior, we have smaller issues that are being addressed. Punch list for the painting, drywall, the base, and touching up some of the cabinetry is occurring right now, as well as some of the electrical work that's just, again, maybe a light switch here and there not functioning properly. We do have some flooring items that we've noted in the past. And as of the 16th of November, when we provided several people a tour, we had 48 hours to evaluate some options as well as some products and determine if those met the requirements for the fire department. We are moving forward with a product that is a flex system. It is a resinous flooring that is applied with an applicator in a, not really a paint on, but it's more of a squeegee on product that then has several surface sealants on it, as well as, again, kind of like the garage fleck that you'll see that will help cover up a lot of the patches and discolorations that we're seeing in the concrete. So we are working towards that. I'm sorry, what was it, Julia? Yes.
Ooh, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. So we are moving forward on that. We've got the flooring system is being ordered right now. We've been told it takes about 4 weeks for that to come in. And once that comes in, they say that it will take about a week to grind the floors and then apply that surface. So we've been told that the end of January will be when those floors will be complete. And again, that gives my contractor time to finish his pre-punch and also request his final punch once he gets substantial completion. And we have offered to look at the station after they finish everything else but the floors to determine if we could work with them on that substantial completion date.
Beth, when you mentioned earlier that they were 25% of the way through, was you mentioning 25% of the punch list they were
Yes, sir.
through?
Yes, sir. I would estimate about 25% of that pre-punch list.
And committee members, as y'all may recall, when we talked about this in back in November, the landscaping is a major issue because it addresses flooding concerns and water management, which has an impact on the ingress and egress of our apparatus. So it's not just a matter of things looking pretty or nice or things blossoming. It is a serious issue of access to the station. It's a safety concern and a response concern as well. And the flooring problems are also not just a matter of them not looking nice. It's also another issue dealing with the building and whether or not they can inhabit the building as well. So none of these are small ticket items. They may be price-wise to some extent, but they really are serious issues that need to be addressed. Does any member of the committee have questions for Beth before we move on to anybody else who needs to talk about this? Okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. There you are. I see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to commend Beth. I mean, she's had a challenging project to manage this time. And my hat's off to her. She really has done yeoman's duty in looking after our interests and trying to get this project where it needs to be. Admittedly, it's had some challenges along the way, but here we are. We can see the finish line in sight. We're finally getting there. I think if they have a good resolution for the flooring system, which we all agreed needed some major attention. I'm sorry she hadn't heard back from the landscaper yet, but to me, the flooring was the big issue. So if we have an acceptable solution to that, I'm hopeful all those other items, you know, the contractor will be able to work with us and get those resolved. I must say that I agree completely with Robert Baer's article about this facility in yesterday's paper. It really makes a statement for our department, for our city, for West Ashley. It's we've got these kinks to work out, and Beth's doing a great job, but it's going to be a building we're all going to be proud of. Thank you, Beth.
Of course. Thank you, sir.
Beth, I just want to echo the mayor's comments on that as well. You've really been on top of this game for us. The mayor and I took a tour of the last week of the new training facility. And it really, these two projects in West Ashley are top-notch projects. And the folks who have been engaged with the development of that is something we need to be very proud of and excited about. So a lot of good things happening over in West Ashley from the public safety side with these two facilities. I really do appreciate what we have coming over there as quality facilities. Does anybody else from the city staff wish to chime in on anything? Is there something that we need to supplement with what Beth has updated us on? I don't think we need to go into the executive session then. And Beth, I do think we probably ought to have another update in our first January 2021 meeting. And we'll just have to schedule that. And unless there's something else that Jared or Susan needs to tell us about, I don't think there's a need to go into executive session. Is that the will of the rest of the committee?
I don't think we have anything to add, Councilmember.
Yes, Susan, what was that? Ms. Sardina?
Yes, sir. I don't believe we have anything to add at this point.
Committee members, any questions about from a legal standpoint? Otherwise, I don't see we need to go into an executive session. Okay. Based on your muteness, we will finish up with that. Beth, again, thank you for that update. Jared, thanks for being available. The rest of the team, thank y'all for being around, and we'll just get an update in about a month's time on this issue. Okay.
Thank you.
The next item of business is a discussion on city permitting. I had a long conversation with Councilmember Jackson about this, and I've been on the phone previously with Chief Reynolds and Susan Hodina about permitting issues. Sometimes we get questions as to how are you allowing that group to meet, type of question, particularly in the pandemic. And there have been certain things we've had to adjust because of COVID-19, dealing with permitting issues, and we have ordinances dealing with assemblage and the size of assemblage. And I asked Susan if she could just sort of give us a review as to what are our limitations legally as to what we can and cannot permit and the size of that. I know that there was a federal case that came out regarding the city about restricting the size of permits. So, Susan, if I could put you on the spot a little bit and sort of give us a quick primer on that issue for us about permitting, and Chief Reynolds, I may ask you to sort of chime in after Susan gives us a little update on that. Okay.
Yes, sir. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a background in my understanding of what you were looking for today, and then I'm going to turn it over to Steve Rummelin, who has probably the most recent experience with our permitting process. But yes, you're right. Just as first of all, the only thing we're going to be talking about today are permits that are issued by the police department in connection with protests, demonstrations, things of that matter. You know, we have another permitting process for special events, which are more in tune with, you know, food and wine and seaweed and those things. So it was my understanding that we would just be talking about those ordinances dealing with the police permitting situation. You're correct. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you are correct. There was a case a number of years ago, actually even before I came to the city, and where the city police department's parade permitting system was struck down by Judge Norton in federal court because the number of participants in a protest that triggered the permit process was very low. And I can't remember exactly the number, but it was very, very few, under 10, maybe it was even 5. And so the court said that that was too restrictive. And therefore we revised the ordinance a number of years ago to basically say that any group that was over, that would hit the mark of 50 or more was required to get a permit. However, as this council knows, we passed an emergency ordinance a number of months ago, which was certainly constitutionally valid, which allowed us to decrease that number to 25. And so our current ordinance says that any group who is interested in getting a permit for a protest or demonstration or whatever, and that number is going to be 25 or more, needs to get a permit. That being said, however, I think Steve can walk through the process and discuss how the ordinance is applied on a day-to-day basis, with the understanding that the First Amendment heavily hangs over everything that the police department does in this respect. So, Councilmember Shade and members of the committee, if you don't mind, I'd like Steve to sort of bring you up to date on what the current policies and procedures are regarding issuing these permits. And then I have a feeling that Chief Reynolds may want to add some additional comments.
Sure, Steve, you're on.
Thanks. So the procedure is laid out in our ordinances and our code of ordinances. And basically the permit process is laid out in sections 19.326 through 19.337. It says that no person shall engage in any form of parade unless they get a permit, and that's only applying to people that are groups of 50 or more, or in this case now with the COVID, 25 or more. So you have to file an application with the chief of police no longer than 30 days before your event and no less than 3, although in the ordinance it says that the chief has discretion to issue permits on less than 3 days notice. There's a section 19-330, which talks about the standards for issuance. And these are the considerations that the chief looks at in deciding whether to issue the permit. And that's whether the conduct of the parade, and when I say parade, the definition of a parade includes a protest or a demonstration. So I know a lot of people think of parades as a procession down a street. This also includes stationary demonstrations and protests by definition under our ordinance. Conduct of the parade will substantially interrupt the safe and orderly movement of traffic, require diversion of police officers, concentration of persons or animals, will interfere with fire and police protection, interfere with movement of firefighting equipment, and a number of other considerations basically having to do with public safety and convenience of the public. If a permit is denied, there is an appeal process that actually goes to city council for consideration. And there also is a provision that provides for an alternate. So if on a particular weekend, some group wants to have a demonstration in a particular area, but there's already another group that is occupying that area, the police will offer, well, you can't do it on that weekend, but you could do it on the next weekend or a month from now or something. So we try and accommodate those events, but also are wary of conflicts of different groups having events in different areas. And then basically it talks about the police can set conditions for the permits. And some of the conditions we have currently that are standard have to do with COVID guidelines of wearing masks and distancing and that sort of thing. We have conditions that there be no firearms or other weapons, no blocking sidewalks, no blocking streets, and those sorts of things. And Lieutenant Bradley is on the call as well. He's one of the commanders here that is over this unit. And typically what the procedure here is in the police department is he or someone from his unit will reach out to someone who has submitted an application and kind of go over what the expectations are, what the group is planning to do, and how the police can accommodate that while still ensuring the safety of the public and as little disruption to services as possible. And then that's all put in writing in a permit, which the organizer is supposed to have with them. And then the department is made aware of the event, so officers know about it and can address it accordingly. And so that's basically the process. We've had a lot of applications for different events over this past year. And we try and accommodate all these groups as best we can while still ensuring the safety of all involved.
Thank you, Steve. And a couple of points, and I don't want to take the chief's thunder from this, but we can't deny a permit because we may not agree with that application's stance on certain issues or certain things. We had to remain neutral as to who those groups may or may not be. And if the group is less than pre-COVID-19 regulations, less than 50, they don't need a permit. And that usually is what causes us a problem. This may be a good segue for you, Chief, but the idea of the permitting process is we know who the folks are. We have a contact person to go to if issues arise. And so we do encourage the permitting part of all this so that we know who we're dealing with and who to have contact with in case there's something that needs to be addressed. So with that, Chief, I'll sort of turn this back over into you with any comments or suggestions you have.
Believe it or not, I don't have anything to add. I think you all covered it adequately. And that's probably surprising for you. Unless there's additional questions, I think you all covered everything.
Any member of the committee first, before opening it up to Councilmember Jackson on the top, if they have a question.
So, Mr. Chairman, just very briefly, if you don't mind, I just want to thank the chief and staff for keeping us informed as to the applications that are coming through and all the parades and protests and everything else. It's been very, very helpful to at least give people some advance notice of what's going on. So I think the permitting process is one thing, just keeping information flowing between what you all know through permitting and others and getting it into the community has been a bonus. So thank you for that.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Saccharin.
Thank you, Chair. That was going to be my question, but apparently it is being shared. I'm not receiving those. So if the information is going out, I'd love to know. I was going to ask if that's public information, if and when folks submit the applications for permits.
Okay. Councilmember Shealy, I'll get to all the committee members first. Councilmember DeSalvo.
I don't have anything right now. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, I do think Councilmember Saccharin makes a good point, Chief, and I happen to be on that Central Business District distribution list as Councilmember Seekings is, and so I think it'd be fine, Chief, if we just include all of council on that distribution that we send out every Friday that lists all the permit applications that have been approved for the weekend or any time for that matter. So let's include everybody on that email. And Mr. Chairman, I did want to thank Steve and the chief and Jason Bruder, and I don't know who else is on the call from police department. You know, we've all had a challenging year with the COVID-19, and admittedly, that kind of put us off our rhythm earlier this year when we basically banned all gatherings of individuals, you know, in our city for the coronavirus purposes. And we quit issuing permits altogether, not only for parade permits that the police department does, but for permits for, you know, festivals and everything else. We just, you know, when coronavirus hit us, we kind of shut down, and we obviously learned that we needed to get back in business of the police department issuing these permits and monitoring them, because it was very helpful having communication with whatever group was wanting to gather and express themselves in our city. We certainly allow that, and it's a constitutional right, but it's very helpful for us to have that communication going with the organizers of these events. And since we got the permit process going again, when was that achieved? Back in mid-June, I think it was. It's been most helpful, and Councilmember Seeking's right. The communication has been very positive, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. I think Councilmember DeChampo of our two visiting council members had her hand up first. No,
I was just gonna tell Councilmember Saccharin that it's updates that come out from Captain Thompson, so can reach out to him to be put on that distribution list. And they're extremely helpful. They help us with our constituents a lot, so I appreciate it.
We'll add all of council.
The best ones are when he sends out an email on Friday that says, there are no planned events for this weekend. That's the best news. We love that.
So one clarification on that, though. Captain Thompson's emails are restricted to the central business district. So sometimes we do get a permit at the Battery or maybe even West Ashley. There's normally at the
Abortion clinic.
Planned Parenthood Center out there. They apply for permits out there. So we do have other permits other than the ones that Captain Thompson reports. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, so we just want to make sure we get all on the distribution list for any permit, regardless of the location of the city. Councilmember Jackson, you're the one who brought this to my attention, so I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to chime in or ask any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate you putting it on the agenda so that we could all be updated about, what we're required to do and cannot do by law. Obviously, my inspiration about this was the events of Saturday, December 5th. And maybe in using that as sort of a case study, I know that we cannot, evaluate based on our own values, the First Amendment content that might be out there in public with people who want to gather under some sort of permitting rule. But I also don't know to what extent are we able to refuse to give a permit to a group that basically layers on to itself another group. How do we control what actually happens when we're given a permit request by some couple of local residents who have a group in there that they've named, and then all of a sudden we're inundated by people that we would not choose to invite into our community streets for the kinds of activities that they were perpetuating on December 5th, from my understanding. So I realize that a lot of that is closing the barn door. We can't predict what's going to happen ahead of time. If people are submitting a piece of paper, that's the permit. But I do think that, we're also very cognizant of groups that are forming in this era of current polarizing events, that we do not want to have potential of any sort of violence or confrontation that could have occurred if the police hadn't been called out that day. So that's, I know we've got to go by the law. But it seems to me, and I think this is what I said to you, Chairman, and I know this is just me speaking, that sometimes I would rather see our city err on the side of doing the right thing and then having to be held responsible in a challenge to our authority and some sort of appeal or something like that. When does common sense take over? I guess that's, sort of my just Midwestern self asking. That's what concerned me after December 5th. Thanks.
Thank you. And sort of a tail to that comment or question, Chief, in the event that would happen on December the 5th, there are other groups who are not on the permit show up. Do we treat them as part of the same permit application, or because now you may have other folks joining in the original permit who are not part of that application process, or you may have folks who we sometimes just label as being counter protesters or counter rallies, who may not have gotten a permit, but they're coming out in response to, Group B shows up because Group A showed up, and they want to show their support as a counter. That's an assembly, obviously. That's sort of a multi-level question to either you, Chief, or Steve. If you also respond to that, I appreciate it.
It's kind of all the above, and I'll actually call on Lieutenant Bradley, who's on the call, just to briefly, between George and Steve, they can talk about this, but what you're articulating is our challenge in 2020, really almost since May, every weekend, throughout the week. These are all great questions. There's no simple way. It goes back to what Steve covered. Here's it has to be consistent. We can't just pick and choose which groups that are allowed to speak. The Constitution speaks very clearly. There's a lot of case law that supports people's right to speak, whether we agree with it or not, whether they're left, whether they're right, whether we like what their message is. We have to make for a safe event. That's our responsibility. And so we look at the permitting process as a way of framing the conversation with those groups that are going to come. If there's only a few people, they're not required to have a permit, as Susan said earlier. If there's a certain number of them and they're over that number, which requires a permit, and they choose not to get a permit, then we do enforcement and we'll cite the person who's leading that effort. And we've cited many people this year. And we don't pick and choose who we're going to cite. We don't pick and choose who gets the permit. We stick to what our process is, and we try to be consistent in how we apply that with everybody. George, I don't know if you want to speak to that briefly. The dilemma that was just shared is that's our dilemma almost every weekend.
Yeah, Chief. So you're exactly right. I'm sorry, Councilman Sheet.
I said, go ahead and jump in.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, Chief, you're exactly right. I mean, we try to make these permits to where we can have interaction, communication, not only up until the point of getting that permit, but through the process and the event itself, trying to make sure that we can make it safe for everybody that's there. And that is our number one goal, is just making sure that everybody can have their First Amendment rights, their freedom to assemble, and make sure that everybody can do it safely, not only those people there, but also the people that are in the city at the time.
And I'll just add one thing. There is in the ordinance a provision that allows the police to revoke a permit where the conditions of the permit are violated. So if you get in a situation where you have issued a permit and the permit holder is not following the conditions of the permit, you can break that assembly up. And of course, any other laws that we have in the city or the state are certainly applicable throughout the course of any kind of demonstration. So if there's disorderly conduct, assaults, damage to property, all those laws come into play as well, regardless of the group or the message.
Thank you both, all three of you, commented on that. Councilman Seeking, did you have a hand up? I didn't. Okay. Committee members, anybody have a comment, a response to what Councilmember Jackson's concerns were and the responses that we had? Okay. I just think that, to echo what the mayor said, is that these things are really very trying for the public safety officials, that particularly the COVID-19 environment that we're in, and we do have to protect First Amendment right to speech and assemble. Along the same time, we need to protect our citizens, our community, and for these things not to be disruptive. That's a concern I think we all have with this. And then the counter protest is the other part of the equation to take into consideration. So I just, my hat's off to the chief and his team and our legal staff on how they're handling all of this. It's not easy in a normal circumstance, and it's not easy under these environments. I related to Councilman Jackson in one of our conversations several years ago with Chief Little's two prior predecessors, that the city permitted a Ku Klux Klan rally, and there was a photograph taken of Chief Greenberg standing in the face of the Grand Dragon fella, and it was just, you know, you can come here because the law makes me have you here, but you're in my town and you can abide by the law. It was a very poignant photograph, and it may have made the national news, I'm not sure, but it was just really interesting how we balance that out, and that's part of our constitutional rights, obviously. But we do need to make sure our community is safe and protected with all of this. And I appreciate the discussion on it, Councilman Johnson. Thank you for bringing it back to our attention. I think the community just needs to know what our rules and restrictions are that we need to enforce to make sure our community is safe and all of that. So all of y'all, thank you for your comments, and Chief, thank you and your staff for the wonderful job that you have done, particularly in 2020. Any other comments, questions before we move on to the next item? Okay, so the next item is approval to sign a letter of collaboration with TPD to collaborate to collaborative research. There's a lot of collaboration in this agenda regarding police hate crime projects. Steve, I think this is in your ballpark as well. Item number 5. You're muted.
So we received a request from 2 professors, one from Eastern Carolina University, one from UNC Charlotte, and they're applying for some funding from the National Science Foundation to do basically a collaborative research study on policing hate crimes. And basically, if they get the funding, they're asking for a commitment from us to collaborate with them in their research. There is no financial resources that would be required, but what we would be agreeing to is allowing them to ride along with our officers, conduct surveys, have some access to our data, and then at the end of that, I presume there would be a report which would hopefully have some information that we as a department could use to improve on the issue of policing hate crimes.
So the commitment from the city would be the commitment from the police department to work with these 2 professors and allow the ride-ons and other data sharing as well, Steve? That would be the extent of it?
Correct, just basically providing them with data. Provide them with access to our officers. There may be some surveys involved, but basically providing them access.
And Chief Rose, I presume you're okay with this process and see the value that could come out of this?
Yeah, I had a brief conversation with Councilmember Shealy earlier today about this, and I'll just say, just generally, to me, it's important to explore partnerships with the research community. One of the things that make us a better agency is blending between the researchers and the practitioners and looking for evidence-based practices. Hate crime obviously is a significant issue. It's something that's very important to our communities. And the more that we can explore these partnerships just in general, the better. These letters are just initial letter of intent to help them in getting and trying to secure funding for a project. I would say, I think Wendy, who's on the line, and I talked about this, probably 1 in 10 of these actually gets full funding and comes to fruition. The idea is good, and then usually you have more opportunity to kind of look more closely at what you're willing. You can kind of negotiate what your commitment levels are. There's no fiscal impact. One of the concerns would be, does this take away from what we're doing? Obviously, right now, fighting things like violent crime and the safety in our communities is of paramount importance. But we do ride-alongs all the time now anyways, except for the COVID, that's had an impact on that. But this would be something later in the future that would, I think, help us.
Thank you. Councilmember Shealy, since you had a question for the chief, I'm just going to give you the first opportunity to, if you have any questions or comments from what the chief has said to us, or Steve has said to us.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, he answered the question that I had. I just, I was just wondering how time consuming this is going to be. Is it going to pull us away from, doing other jobs, I guess? And if it's valuable to the chief and to everyone, then I'm certainly for it, Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Wendy, is there anything else you need to add to what the chief or Steve have brought up?
No, sir. Just that, we'll do everything we can to manage the demand and make sure that we're not creating undue distraction for our officers.
Okay. All right, so I'll entertain a motion to approve item number 5.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Now, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Number 5 passes. Wonderful. Steve, you are number 6 as well, I believe. Item number 6, approval with the Charleston Dorchester Mental Health Center and CPD.
Right. So we have a in-house full-time professional mental health counselor that works with our families that are involved in cases of domestic violence, the victims of domestic violence. And this is a person we've had here at least as long as I've been here. I think it started in 2016. So this is just basically a renewal of that contract. We had been doing it by different amendments, but now we've run out of amendments. So this is just a reiteration of the old contract, and it's at a cost of $20,000 per year for that full-time person in our office.
So are we just updating this or just renewing it more or less?
Basically, it's kind of both. It's basically renewing, but the price hasn't changed that we're paying for the counselor, and the duties that the counselor performs hasn't changed. If there may be some different wording in there, that's a possibility, but the gist of it remains the same from the previous 4 to 5 years.
Thank you, sir. I'll entertain a motion to approve item number 6.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on item number 6? Yes, sir. Mr. Thacker, Councilman Thacker.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on this position. Is it possible to share with us maybe at a next public safety meeting, just some of the metrics on the number of cases this person handles typically since the position started? As we talk about policing and some of the extra work that our officers have to deal with, I'd be interested to know, what capacity that this person works, and if there's potentially a need or, I guess a comparison to other departments around the state in terms of mental health professionals working within the PD. Just wondering what their caseload is, and I guess comparing it to other departments across the state.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chief. Go ahead.
Steve, can you please make sure we follow up and we'll get it on the agenda for the next time? I think we should be celebrating things like this. We talk about finite funding, the fact that the police cannot be the answer to every problem, the fact that the police are probably overtasked with things that are really outside of our expertise and outside of what really should even be our responsibility. So I think this is an area where we have partnership with mental health professionals that are doing jobs that are, I think, yielding good outcomes. There are things that we need to be talking probably more about. And so I think that's a great idea. I would welcome that, and we'll be ready. We'll put that on the agenda for next time.
Thank you.
I was going to say, Councilman Thacker, that the number of cases with CDD, I think across the county have increased. I'm not sure if that's related to COVID-19 or not, but there are more that I've noticed than pre-COVID-19. So glad to have these professionals. They do add a lot to the community and to the victims. One of the things that the General Assembly did on the CDD statute is they upped the penalty if a minor is present or perceived the abuse the verbal or physical component of that. So having a professional deal with minor children who are maybe not the target of the CDD, but are involved by their presence, does have an impact on all that. So it's important that address that issue as well. Mr. Mayor, did you have something? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I'm not hearing you as well today. I know you're out on the water. But
I think that's where we would like to be sometimes. That beautiful sunset behind my head.
there you go. So I was going to say before the request from Councilmember Saccharin that subjectively, I believe this is one of the best bang for the bucks that we get as a city is this agreement with Charleston Dorchester Mental Health Services. They're very helpful to us. And I would just suggest if we're coming back next meeting with some statistics about their help to us in the police department, that we also include Chris Jordan. You know, we have a separate agreement with them to help our homeless population and provide services, you know, outside of the police department. So we're partnering with them in other ways as well. And they're a great partner of ours. Thank you.
Bethany, did we vote?
We
What's
didn't.
that?
No,
Ma'am?
we didn't.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. All right, thanks for keeping me straight, Bethany. All right, item number 7 is a agreement with the Daniel Island Town Association and CPD about license tag reading. Who's going to take that on for us today?
I have that. And this is basically the Daniel Island Town Association has agreed to pay for the installation and the lease payments for 2 years for 3 automatic license plate readers on Daniel Island. And then after that period of time, we would take over the lease for an additional 2 years, provided we're satisfied with the service and the information we're receiving from those license plate readers is beneficial to the department. So I know that Councilmember Del Chapo was instrumental in this, and then I believe the chief has some background on it, but this is, we negotiated this with our technical people and the town association, and we think this is a good opportunity for the police department.
Councilmember Del Chapo, so this is your backyard. You know the Steve to show up on my public safety committee. I have to see if your dog is nearby or not. So, your picture of Bodie.
He's asleep.
We won't disturb him.
I'm sorry?
Anything you want to add to, we will not disturb him.
No.
Anything you want to tell us about this project?
I just think this is a perfect example of partnerships, you know, much like the previous item on the agenda. The town association is being, you know, very gracious in paying for the installation in 2 years, understanding the budget constraints that the city is under. And then for the city to not have to pick up the maintenance agreement or whatever you want to call it until 2 years out. So I just really appreciate, and I think it'll help our officers be able to solve issues in a much more timely fashion on Daniel Island.
Well, thanks for your work on that and bringing it to our attention. And we do have an opt-out provision. If this thing is not working the way we think it's supposed to work, we do have an opt-out provision on that. So I think that's important to know, and appreciate your association picking up the tab for the first half of this.
Thank you.
Chief Reynolds, anything you want to add to this?
I would just say that I think technology can be a force multiplier. This is an example of that. It's a win-win. If you look at the amount of growth that has occurred in that area, Daniel Island, Clements Ferry Road is just exploding. And we don't have the staff and facilities and all the other things to to have an ideal presence in all the areas that we want. So we have to utilize certain things to help us, like Marie just said, with our investigations and other things. And I think this is a great opportunity. Thankful for it. Good
I'll
time.
entertain a motion to approve item number 7.
So moved.
Just a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, Councilmember Chapel, for visiting us and bringing this to our attention. Hopefully, this will be a good partnership with our community on Daniel Island and the police department to help them with solving crimes, maybe preventing crimes from taking place. Thank you all for your work on that. All right, item number 8 is with the University of South Carolina agreement and CPD on formulating a comprehensive racial bias recommendation. Wendy, did you want to talk about this first?
Sure. So basically, this is an agreement to work with Dr. Jeff Alpert of the University of South Carolina and some of his associates. Dr. Alpert is an expert in use of force and has also done research in traffic stops. And so the way this works with these universities is we're basically buying out a class. So we pay the value of one class, and then we get Dr. Alpert's time for the school year, basically. He is hopefully going to help us do some of the evaluation of the use of force recommendations made by CNA, as well as, maybe give some advice on how to approach our data issues with the traffic stop.
So we're committing to $37,000 towards this project.
I'm sorry, sir?
We're committing $37,000.
Yes.
On the hook for it. Okay.
Yes, and that'll also give us, some work from his students. So as a student myself, it's always a pleasure to work for free under the guise of a wise and experienced professor.
And Chief, wasn't this professor somebody that we had called on before as part of our audit? Wasn't he one of the contenders for the contract that we bid out? Is this the same professor I'm thinking about?
I'm not sure if he was in that process, but he has a footprint in the industry, which is substantial. Probably one of the most renowned, respected criminologists in the country. Does work internationally, nationally. He's written a book, actually just recently. He's written many books, but he just recently released a book on use of force and these types of investigations. We're very fortunate that he's out of Columbia and is available and has an interest in helping us. I think he has an affinity for the city of Charleston and this region and the state, and has a lot of involvement in a lot of things, and very independent and very interested in looking at our data. This is no small thing in terms of the audit. I think it's worth mentioning. If you look at the last page, functions to be performed related to the audit: traffic enforcement and data collection, use of force reporting and data collection, body-worn camera, compliance auditing, compliant internal investigation management, recruitment and hiring. This hits in some form on most of those things. It's objective, it's separate from the police department. It will involve people who have the expertise that we don't currently have. And I think it's going to help us a lot in furthering our goals with the audit and making our department better.
Okay. So it sounds like these two items, item number 8 and item number 5, are going to be a huge benefit for the police department as those projects get up on and off the ground. So it sort of ties in together with HAPON looking at that, and then part of our racial bias audit as well. I'm very pleased to see that we're making progress on that, and some of the positive things that are coming out of this audit. So I'll entertain a motion to approve item number 8. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion by any members of the committee? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Appreciate that very much. Thank you, all of you, for your work on that, the involvement that we have on there, and some really positive things that we've been doing to close out this calendar year on our public safety committee. I just want to, this will be our last meeting of the calendar year. I just want to go back and thank the committee. We started off early on in February dealing with the interviews of municipal judges and DUI prosecutors and things of that nature. And it was all pre-COVID that we started off with that. And then we've been dealing with other ordinances and other issues that have come along, particularly with the incident of May 30th. And that being said, Chief, I think that we've extended for another 30 days the opportunity for citizen input on our after action report. I want to make sure that the public was aware of that. And I think Captain Thompson is involved with the final preparations for that report. So hopefully we'll have a update, not a final conclusion, but at least an update at our January meeting, and dealing with the after action report of May 30th. I think we're all anxious to get that final after action report being completed with the input from our community on that. I just want to thank the committee. They have been very patient with me. We've been working very hard on a lot of very extremely important issues. And so thank you all for doing that. This has been a very eventful year. Not exactly what we intended when we started off, but y'all's commitment to this has been very important to the citizens. I think it's very important to our council that they hear from us on these particular issues. I did want to bring up another item. It's not on our agenda, and this is stemming from a conversation I had with Councilmember Jackson over the weekend, Susan Medina, and I don't know if this is really within our purview, but I did notice in some discussions that we were having that we don't have an ordinance dealing with conduct, a code of conduct for council members or for board members or members on other citizen committees. And I had a discussion with Councilmember Gregory about that as well. Mr. Dina, can you just sort of enlighten us a little bit on that and whether or not we can just look at that sometime in the future? I see Sterling's on the phone. I see Councilmember Seeking has a question. So yes, sir.
Well, I just have a comment. I went back and looked at the code, and I don't think this is part of the Public Safety Committee's purview. I think if council wants to adopt certain codes of conduct for council, we can do it. I think boards and commissions, which are generally appointed by the mayor, would fall under his purview with the advice and consent of council. But in looking at the code and what we have responsibility over, I don't believe, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, that this is in our game, so to speak.
Yeah, I went back and looked at that too, Councilmember Seeking, and that's why opening comment about it. It deals with court services and penal ordinances, and this one under that purview. So maybe it's something I can bring up at council meeting tomorrow and address it then. But I did send out an email to everybody over the weekend, so I thought I'd bring it up. So we'll bring it up at council meeting tomorrow at the appropriate time to be under communication or something along those lines.
Can I have a brief moment of follow-up on that, just because this is probably our last Public Safety Committee meeting of the year? One of the things that may be under the purview of this committee, but if it's not, I think because we've got the police chief here, it should be something that brought to attention. I think the mayor probably is going to share interest in this, is the recent dust up over the outdoor dining at Fast and French and the fact that that's creating a public safety issue, not only within the city of Charleston, but perhaps at the courthouse. How do we position ourselves, Mr. Mayor or Chief, through this or any other committee to weigh in on that and see what we can do to support what seems to be a pretty good idea that seems to be meeting some resistance from the county?
Well, thank you. I'm happy to address that. When I first heard the news about it, council member, in fact, I called the county and advocated for the restaurant because as we've all agreed in the last months, we want to encourage more outdoor dining. It's safer. It's helping our restaurant businesses. It's been a good thing. In fact, coming before our council recently and for follow-up is our extension, more permanent extension of those rights or entitlements for our restaurants. That being said, I've read in the paper and Mr. Tootin told me that they had some public safety concerns. I think Chief Reynolds, if he hasn't done so already, will be checking with the county to verify what those concerns are. In the meantime, we've reached out to the ownership of the restaurant and let them know. In fact, I sent Meg Thompson over there to facilitate their full utilization of the Broad Street sidewalk, which is our right of way, as long as there aren't any public safety concerns. The neighbor next door has a little wider sidewalk, the Duffys, and I think Councilmember Seeking's in the next property is yours still. So I think all the adjacent property owners are very willing to let the restaurant utilize more of the sidewalk. And if they ultimately lose their space back on with the county, we're going to make every accommodation we can to expand them on the Broad Street side.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It just seems to me that the county announcing broadly it's a public safety concern, but not elucidating and enumerating what those concerns are, it would seem to me we would have a shared interest in what that was before we could sort of decide whether we thought they were making a wise or not a wise decision.
Right. Well, I've asked Chief Reynolds to check with the sheriff on that.
Thank you.
I know that it seems to be very popular at nighttime, Councilmember Seekings, when I leave my office. There seems to be a healthy crowd of folks behind it, and it seems like just a natural extension of what they would want to do. It's an open area. If the courthouse is closed by the time they're out there in any kind of numbers, and it's a whole lot better that they're back there than on Broad Street, where I'm just waiting for a car to jump the curb while some folks are sitting at that little side table on Broad Street. It makes me a little nervous to see how close they are to that curb. So you're right, from a public safety standpoint, it would be a lot better if they were where they want to be on the county property side of all that. So, Chief, anything else we need to add to that discussion?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, well, I've got you a lot here, and right about at an hour, we covered a lot of ground. Again, thank you, committee members, and thank you, guests, Councilmember Jackson, Councilmember Chopper, for joining us this afternoon. And I will adjourn the meeting and see a handful of you guys at real estate in about 30 minutes. There'll be no further business. We are adjourned.